probably the most common thing that I see like founders get wrong. They make all of the decisions. They become a bottleneck because they just can't keep up. What they try and do is look to other businesses that they admire and import their organisational structure. I consider it cutting and pasting, and it is about as good as asking AI what your structure should be.
Oh, we shouldn't do that.
We shouldn't do that either. Culture exists not on some slide. Culture lives in the stories that people tell each other about working at your organisation. All of those other things are created by people. If you don't pay any attention,
everyone starts to leave and it's too late.
A lot of founders, they feel like what they want to be able to do is have peer-to-peer relationships with their staff. They're uncomfortable holding the status that they actually have. What is important is that you get past being wrong as quickly as you possibly can and get to being right. If you want to be in a fast growth company and you want to be at the top of that fast growth company, you better be learning.
Charlie, you've spent 20 years working at the intersection of people and systems. In your experience, what's the biggest misconception that leaders have about HR?
I think that most, particularly naive leaders like founders who are the first time leading an organisation, they think that HR is there to keep them on the right side of the law. And I mean, certainly that is an essential part of it. But realistically, if you're doing the right things, it should be about 5%. Of what a good people and culture person does.
And so what's the 95%?
So the 95% should be making sure that every person in the organisation is super clear on what it is they need to get done, and it makes it that the organisation and the structure and the systems around them make it feel easy as it can to get that done. So obviously sometimes you're dealing with things that are really difficult to do, but it shouldn't feel like the systems work against you. It should feel like the systems support you to do all of the things that you need to do. And that's what people and culture should be creating, the system, structures, incentives.
So I want to pick up on what you've just said, because you've started using the term people and culture, whereas I asked about HR. Are they the same? Are they different?
Some people would say they're interchangeable, but my view is they're not. And HR is essentially what the old school tradition of human resources was about, which was primarily about compliance. It was about making sure that you are, you have everything documented, that you're on the right side of the law, that you're dealing with, firing people the right way and all of that kind of stuff, which obviously is also included in people and culture. But people and culture as a tradition actually came out of startups, and particularly out of Google in that early sort of .com era. And essentially what Google decided was that HR wasn't really doing much that was strategic for the business. And so they created a people and culture function, which part of it they called people operations, which included the HR stuff, but they also did things like have a people data area where they were actually capturing data and researching what really made people in their business be able to do the right things for the business and really make great strategic decisions and work really well together and love what they were doing and all of that kind of stuff. So people and culture is HR plus all the strategic things that make your business able to be an amazing place to work and an amazing place to get things done.
So HR plus the 95% other stuff. Yeah, interesting. And so if it came out of the early 2000s, the Google era, does that mean that thinking about HR as people and culture is key to innovation? Is there a connection there?
I would say yes. So the thing that Google realised after a very massive failed experiment where they decided in their infinite wisdom that you didn't need people managers, so they actually cut people managers out of their system. And this was when they were at about 2,500-3,000 people.
Wow.
And so they had some executives, but basically they went to one kind of on-paper people manager per 50 engineers.
Wow.
So effectively they cut people management out.
And what were
the
they
structure.
trying to do? Increase productivity?
Yeah, their view, and actually a lot of engineers' view, and I've had this come up a lot through startups organically, like it's kind of comes up through this often engineering view that soft stuff isn't actually doing anything. And so they genuinely tried it, and they did it in a way that they ran it as an experiment. So they captured a whole range of data around performance and like genuine performance, not just whether people were happy, although they did that too, but actually what did they produce? How much did they produce? Did they make good decisions? All of that kind of stuff. And it took them less than a year and they didn't even finish the experiment because the results were so out of this world that it was an absolute disaster.
Wow.
That they plugged them straight back in.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yep.
So how is it that I've been working in startups for 10 years and don't know about this? This feels like did they publish it? How did we find out more about what happened? Does that have a name?
Yeah, so Google published that. There's a few different ones, but the main one that you would want to read is Project Oxygen, which was kind of there after they'd done that failed experiment. They then ran a new experiment, which was what does matter. And they had people managers back in the system, and they tracked this. So at this stage, I think there were 10,000 plus people, so much larger. And they tracked which teams were the most successful over time. And then using those teams, they kind of figured out what did those teams have that was less common in other places. And then they published the results as Project Oxygen.
And so what were those learnings? What are the secrets?
I mean, it sounds really obvious when you actually say it, but basically what mattered was that you had clarity about what your work involved. Mm-hmm. And that included things like having a detailed meeting with your manager every week or 2 weeks, depending on the seniority of the employee. So less senior employees tend to need more frequent check-ins because they tend to go off track a little more often. So every week or 2 weeks, you need to have time with your manager where you're actually knowing whether or not what you have been doing is the right stuff, getting feedback on whether or not your work is good quality and whether you're meeting their expectations, but also just having clarity about how your role fits into the team and how the team fits into the company, so that when you have to make a decision, you don't have to wonder what would someone else do. You can actually think about what would make sense for the role that I play in this team and that this team plays in the company.
Yeah.
So clarity is huge. Connection between the manager and the employee is huge. Mm-hmm. And then there were a couple of sort of basic sort of feedback practices that were really important. So making sure that managers actually had a conversation with their staff, not just about how they were doing now, but about what they wanted to do. So what did they want to be growing into, and how were they going at actually trying to get into those places? Did they need opportunities? Did they need some books to read? Did they need some encouragement to get in there and have a crack? So managers were kind of looking at current performance and future performance, not just one or the other.
And so how did you come to have such a different view on people and culture? This is quite an atypical perspective. So how did you get to where you are with it?
I didn't train in HR. So my training is actually in policy writing, so government policy writing. And then I have a Masters of Applied Positive Psych from Melbourne Uni. So my training kind of comes at it from both. The policy side gives me systems, incentives, like how structures produce behaviour and at a very large scale. And then the positive psych stuff gives me how do human beings do really well, both performance and well-being side. And when you bring those two together, what it allows you to do is to look at the incentives and systems that exist in an organisation and change those where you need to, but also to look at what are the human factors that come in, what do people bring with them when they walk in the door, and how do you kind of maximise what they bring that's good and help to reduce the effect of things that are not as solid. So, if they struggle to get along with people, how do we help them do better there?
And why does this tend, I assume you didn't work at Google in the early 2000s.
No, I was 19, so no.
But it's very much the remit of startup scale-ups, and something that's often talked about is people and culture and getting that right. Why is it so prevalent and important in organisations like that? Is it just a trend of people wanting to run businesses like Google and compete with them, or is it more important than that?
Look, I think there is some element of the Google being very cool, particularly back in that early 2000s era. But I think the bigger piece is actually that really it matters enormously to the company's survival and to the company's success. And one of the things that startups, particularly Silicon Valley startups, but here as well, are ruthless about is they will do anything that makes it more likely that their company survives and thrives. And so if people and culture makes a big difference, people jump on that bandwagon. And it really, really does make a huge difference, particularly in the kind of middle stage where it's really, really common for businesses to fail. So everybody thinks they fail kind of in that sub 10 employees early stage getting product market fit thing, and some do. But actually most of them fail sort of years 5 to 7. And that's because they can't build the machinery to sit behind their product. You don't get to year 5 to 7 without having some decent signals from the market. But if you can't then build a business that keeps being able to produce your product, keeps being able to support your customers, and keeps innovating to do those things better and better and better, then you will either sort of wither on the vine and not get there, or you'll get overtaken by someone who can do it better than you.
So let's dive into that a little bit further. Obviously, Google's learnings come from a large workforce, 3,000, I think you said.
When they started playing with it,
Yeah. What does good people and culture leadership look like in an organisation of 10 or an organisation of 100 staff?
Yeah.
Is it different? Is it the same?
Yeah. So the thing that's really important in those very early stages, sort of 10 through to 100, is that that's the point at which you don't have a benchmark for anything. You don't really have systems much. You don't have a long history of doing things any particular way, which is kind of what will become your anchor points. So you're in the early stages of getting to actually design those. And if you don't design them intentionally, you will get whatever, frankly, crap that you just happen to do. And so it's kind of like you get certain opportunities with children when they're below 3 years of age to kind of change the way that they think about themselves and think about the world, because they're forming those opinions at that age. And if you don't get that right then, it's much harder to change. It's the same in early stage companies. They're toddlers. They're figuring out how they do things. Yeah. And so you have a huge opportunity.
And there's a legacy from how you've behaved then, regardless.
Exactly.
Interesting. And so what is the most common mistake you see leaders making in that 10 phase that sets them up for failure or friction when their business is bigger?
Probably the most common thing that I see like founders get wrong is that they think it's really important that they make all of the decisions. And so they don't create any opportunity for anyone below them to be able to make decisions, which pretty quickly overwhelms them. They become a bottleneck because they just can't keep up. If everything's going well in the market and your product is something that people want to buy, then it doesn't take very long before you as a founder simply can't keep up with that pace, and you need people below you to be able to make good decisions. And if you haven't trained them along the way to be able to do that, and for you to know that you can trust them, then you will hang on to that decision making for way too long until you then have to make a hard cut from you doing it to someone else doing it. And then it's super uncomfortable because they will sort of automatically get it wrong because they haven't had a chance to learn.
But I mean, the thing here though is that in startup world, there is a lot of pressure and expectation on the founders to be the ultimate leader. They're the ones that answer to investors. They're the ones that evangelize the business to the market, create the market, and they also are usually the ones that bring the team members in. The team members want to work with them, so it's often quite natural. So when is it right for the founder to be that ultimate leader and decision maker versus having to delegate or pass that on to others?
So the way I think about it is it's the founder's job to make sure that the business makes the right decisions, not to make them all themselves. And so the trick there is, as a founder, to be encouraging and enabling people to make small, easy to fix decisions as early as you can possibly imagine, so that you can find out where they make strong decisions and where they don't, and you can help shape them to be able to make stronger decisions in the places where they're not as strong. And the earlier you start that, like you could start that with one employee. And in fact, because for a little while I had an employee in my business, and that is exactly what I did. Over the first 12 months, I intentionally and progressively gave her more and more and more big decisions to make, and gave her feedback on every decision that she made, so that she could see that, you know, she was progressing. I could see where she was likely to make an error, and she could see where she was likely to make an error, so that she could kind of start fixing those errors, but also she could know when she needed to ask for help, so that she became confident in the areas where she was strong, and she checked in the areas where she wasn't as strong and learned fast there. And so when you go into an organisation and start working with them, and they might be at the 10 to 15 size, what do you see often are the most common places that could happen, like the places that it's most, Where would you see it?
Yeah, obvious for founders to be able to immediately start delegating certain decisions. As a founder myself, I cringe at the thought of like, but I'm accountable for this. I have to get the sales to happen. I have to make sure the staff are engaged. I need to make sure the engineers understand the product roadmap. None of that all feels too high risk to hand over.
Yeah, so the trick is to figure out which decisions can be rolled back and which decisions can't.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you were going into a big investor meeting, like, don't delegate that. Take yourself and your most highly skilled people and delegate only in the event where someone can do it better than you can, because you don't get that as a do-over.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking about a situation where you're consistently getting a bunch of questions about how to answer a query from customers, so there's a set of queries that come in fairly frequently. If your staff have to come and check with you whether they've written the email correctly, then you don't have any structure for them at all.
Mm.
And what you should have is spitballed with them and workshopped with them. What are the common queries that we get? What are the kind of answers that we think are the good answers, and why are they good answers?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you also give them why, then when they get a question that's just a little sideways from where the normal question is, they're much more likely to be able to spitball a good answer. And if they get it wrong, it's pretty easy to fix. They can go back to that customer and say, hey, I thought it was this. It's actually not quite that. It's something over here. Here's the real answer. Let me fix that for you. It's not on the front page of the paper. None of your other customers know about it. Even if that individual customer is super pissed off about it, it's pretty likely that that's able to be managed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's relatively low risk. You can roll it back if they get it wrong. And if they get it wrong, you then get an opportunity to talk to them about what were they thinking? And not like, what were you thinking? But like, tell me about how you arrived at that being the answer.
Yeah.
What was your thought process? So that you can understand what was in their thought process that's not in yours, or vice versa, what's in yours that's not in theirs. And then you can adapt, get them to update.
And so when a leader is thinking about the people and culture sort of structure within their organization, what is the split in importance between making sure you get the right people on board versus the systems and rituals you have when they're there? Are they equally important, or how do you think about, is it always just get the right person, everything else works itself out?
Absolutely not. So the way I think about it is that your people, whenever you bring them in, they need to be able to do the job that they came in to do. And if your systems and structure don't support them to be able to do that, including to make decisions where they feel that, where they're expecting to be able to make decisions, then they won't be happy. So even if you hired the right person, you won't keep them. So I think of them as being in lockstep, where the systems and processes are there to support the people. And so you need them just in time for the person to need them.
Mm.
And that means sometimes that you need to put them in before someone arrives. And sometimes you can put them in kind of in the early stages of them arriving if you don't yet know what you don't know. So particularly when you hire more senior people who often will know more about their field than you will, don't try and design what their structures and systems and stuff look like without them, because you will get it wrong. And then the systems and instructions will constrain them rather than enable. So if you don't know a lot about the space, then wait for the first one or two hires and hire a little bit more senior than you think you need, so that they can help you design the systems that support other people as well.
And that's a really common question that I hear, right? Or phenomenon I hear about is that, there will be the founding team. Maybe there's an engineer on the founding team. Maybe there's not. Increasingly, there's not these days. There'll be founders leading sales and market and investment, those things. But then there comes a point where they want to bring in a chief product officer or a head of customer success or a CTO. Talk us through how you would, in a growing organization, help a business think about how to get that hire right. If I, as a founder, don't actually understand what a product manager does, how do I know I'm picking the right person and that the system, then I'm asking them to design their role once they're in there? That feels like a terrible idea.
Why?
Because I wouldn't know how to lead someone like that. If I'm not from a product background, how do I even know I'm hiring the right person in the first place?
Well, you don't, because you don't know enough yet.
Yes.
So don't hire someone yet.
Ah, okay.
If you don't know why you're hiring someone.
That was a hypothetical, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying like Jess doesn't know enough. I mean, if you're a founder in that position, why are you hiring a chief product officer? If you don't know what it is that you need from that person, then you don't know whether you need a chief product officer or a CTO or a growth officer or something else.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting thread to pull on, right? Because it is, a really common pattern that a business is scaling, and we've just taken on capital, and we're like, great, our objectives now are to turn this into a SaaS interface or to have a whatever, And so therefore, often when you're capital raising, you're picking the job descriptions that are needed, and then the money comes in to do that. You've scoped out, like, that's going to cost me $200K. We'll get that person within 6 months. Let me now go and find a head of customer success. And you're now suggesting perhaps that's not the right way to do it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely telling you that is a terrible way to do it.
That's what to do.
Yeah. So the thing that I see lots of early stage founders do, particularly when they get their first decent round of funding, is that what they try and do is look to other businesses that they admire and import their organizational structure.
Specifically, that's what we do.
Yes. I consider it cutting and pasting. And it is about as good as asking AI what your structure should be.
Oh, we shouldn't do that.
We shouldn't do that either. And that's because you will get the same generic answer every time.
Okay.
And what is right for one business is not right for every business. And in particular, a business today, even a very similar business model today is going to be different from the similar business model 5 years ago. So if you look to the companies that you admire, what you're doing is importing a sort of structure, an org structure that is good for them, probably, maybe not, and good for them now.
Yeah.
Not good for them when they were your size, not good for them when they were in your position in the market, and not good for them, not good for you because you're a founder who's different from whoever the founders were in that organization. You will have different strengths and weaknesses from that founding group, and therefore the people in your immediate team around you should be there as complementary to you. So if you cut and paste, you will almost certainly have it wrong. Like, this is not just you'll kind of do okay. This is actually grossly wasteful and also super frustrating for the senior people that you bring in, because you bring them in because of their experience, but actually what you need from them isn't what their experience has taught them to do. And you don't figure that out until they come in and they try and do all the things they normally do. And you're like, well, this is crap. It doesn't work. But that's what you brought them in to do. And if you do that too soon in the market, you get absolutely terrible name.
Yeah. Right.
And then it's really hard for you to hire your next group of senior people.
So what should the hypothetical founder looking for someone to drive product, what should they do if they think that's called a chief product officer, but they know they need that function off their plate as a founder? How should they be thinking about filling that? Yeah.
So the thing to do first is to figure out, what do you need done?
Yeah.
Don't give it a name yet. You don't need a name yet.
So you need tasks. Like, in my day, what would I actually hand over?
What am I doing?
Yeah.
Tasks. And also, what is the goal? Like, what am I trying to achieve with those tasks, right? Because it's often the case as a founder that your background and experience wouldn't qualify you for the role that you actually need to hire.
Yeah.
So the way that you were doing it and the tasks that you were doing is probably like a little bit off in terms of what it should be.
Yeah.
But you know what the goal needs to be. So make sure you get the goal really clear. What is it that you want them to be able to do? How would the business be different in 12 months if you manage to nail this role? And then once you've got that, then you can start talking to other people who have achieved goals like yours and ask them who they got to do it. Don't ask them what the name of the role was. Ask them who the people were, and then see if you can talk to those people about how they would describe what you need. Because great titles are only great if they match what the actual work is that needs to be done, and they should be a signal to the market that you need a particular thing. And so if you name it the wrong thing, you're going to get people coming to you who want to do the thing you named, not the work that you actually need. So talk to people in the field who actually know what it's called and trust them when they tell you what you need in terms of a role, and ask them why. Tell them what, like, interrogate them so that you're going into this knowing what it is that this person should be able to bring for you. And then if you need to in an interview process, have an expert on the panel.
Yeah.
Don't expect yourself to be an expert at hiring when you are not an expert in hiring. You know, have someone who's good at hiring and someone who's good at that role, and you're there as a kind of bench test for whether or not you want to work with them.
Yeah. And so assuming a founder can do that and get that right and then brings people into the organization, how important then is the way, the systems, and like, do you always recommend work in an agile Kanban way, or like, are there good systems to lean to, or is it always dependent on the business?
It's always dependent on the business.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah. It depends. The classic answer of an expert.
Hard and fast rules,
So the thing is that all of the sort of classic systems, Kanban, Agile, Waterfall, all of the different ways to run projects, all of the different ways to structure organizations, all they are doing is kind of making decisions about where discipline lives and where decisions are made. And so the thing you need to figure out for your business is what kind of discipline do you need?
Discipline meaning skill set? Like capability?
No. Discipline meaning like rigor.
Yeah. Okay.
So, for example, at the Agile, Scrum-based Agile system puts the decision-making as much of it as it possibly can into the small team, so into a very small team. And the team is supposed to be designed to have all of the requisite skills and expertise that it needs to be able to collectively make those decisions. So it's a very strong intentional model around delegating authority to the closest people to the work, and then structuring to make sure they have everything they need to do it. And Scrum puts the discipline, the rigor, into the process. And so Scrum is actually a highly disciplined, rigorous process that is actually quite onerous to run well. But if you can be bothered going through that discipline, and if you need the benefits of having it work for having those little teams be very autonomous, then it's an excellent process. But if that's not what you need, then you shouldn't use Scrum. So it really depends on what kind of results you need in your business. Where do you need flexibility? Where do you need rigor? And where do you need decisions to be made?
And how, if there are leaders listening to this facing this conundrum of, we've got a team, we think they're the right people, it's just the rituals and work practices are perhaps letting us down, where should they start? How do they start thinking about putting processes in place? Yeah.
So the first place you should look is what is currently not working. And your team will know this, because if it is the case that you have the right people, and that's a pretty big if, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of founders rate their team far higher than they should.
Right.
So I'll come back to that in a sec. But if you have the right people, they will be frustrated in the places where things are not working.
Okay.
And
so frustration from your team is a good sign?
Frustration with your team is an excellent sign, actually.
Great.
Because what it is them hitting a standard that they expect to be higher and wanting to fix it.
Yeah.
So if you're getting frustration from your team, that just tells you their high expectations aren't being met somewhere.
If you want a team that is raising the bar and trying to achieve more, yeah.
And if you're in a startup and you don't want a team that's raising the bar, then you should probably stop taking funding because you're going down the toilet.
All right, so these are some of the things that work well in a small team. So how you get the first hires, get them working well together, make sure they're frustrated so they're raising the bar. What about the first 100 hires? Does that feel similar on scale, or how should founders or leaders think differently when they're getting to that size?
Yeah, so as you get sort of past about 30 people, you need to start thinking about the fact that you no longer have enough contact with the individuals, all of them, for them to know you well. And what that means is that they will have a different view of you than you would like them to have of you. They will have a view of you that is based on what they have directly seen and what other people say about you. It's fundamentally different. And so you need to actually start thinking well before 100 about how it is that you transfer the things that people need to know about you as an individual, because they are massive influences on your culture. And you need to be tracking and understanding what are the kind of things that people talk about related to your culture, because culture exists not on some slide where you described a bunch of things that you wish it was. Culture lives in the stories that people tell each other about working at your organization. And so that will start happening quite actively around 30, where you might start hearing stories that you don't like, that tells you you're not doing a good enough job of leading that culture. But by the time you get to 100, it's well and truly past that stage. So at 100 people, there will be large numbers of people in your organization, at least say 30, maybe more if you're running a hybrid or remote organization, that those 30 or so people have very limited contact with you and have a big status gap between you and them, which means that your behavior is being interpreted through a lens of you being highly important to them and highly scary. And that's not because you've done anything wrong in terms of not being friendly. It's just because the status gap means that you could fire them and they are reliant on the job that you have for them, and they really, really want to please you, which means everything you do is amplified to such a degree that tiny missteps end up making people feel terrible. And it's really, really easy to get it wrong.
Can you give us an example of something that a behavior a founder might have that's actually fine at 10 people but doesn't work at 50 or 100?
Yeah, massive one, changing their mind.
Oh, okay. Explain that further.
So most founders, part of what allows them to get to something successful is that they update quickly based on new evidence. So it's a really strong feature and it's actually very supportive. But if you don't signal your decisions well, by the time you get to 100, you've updated because of useful information and you've changed your mind because of evidence, which is good. But what you've done to people is tell them one thing and do something else, or tell them one thing on Wednesday and by Thursday of the following week, you're like, why are you still doing that? And that's so common and incredibly demoralizing for people because they then can't get any clarity about what it is that they are actually trying to do for this organization. And most of their job starts feeling like a waste of time because they start expecting that everything they do will get decided that it's not happening after they've done it.
So how do you avoid that? Does it mean the pace of decision-making has to slow right down or the decision-making happens elsewhere?
It means the pace of decision-making needs to keep up and the loops need to keep up. So you definitely can't slow down the decision-making because that would be a death knell for your organization.
Yeah.
But what you need to do is try and be getting as many of the decisions to be happening as close to the ground as they can, with some guardrails, with some ways that information is coming back up to you so you can sense check, make sure you believe that those are still the right decisions and you can roll something back if it's incorrect. And you need to talk all the time about why. You simply cannot explain enough times why you think something, why you do it the way you do. The thing you need to talk about all the time is not what's being made, what the decision is now, what we should do, which is what people easily talk about. It's why we're doing that. So that when you make a decision that you then need to change, you can explain why you are either using the same principles and the evidence is different, or your principles have updated because you were wrong. And if you're wrong, for the love of God, say so. And say it super clearly, I was wrong. Not, well, I did the best that I could at the time, or, well, the information at the time signaled that I should do blah, 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 so I did that. But actually, now the information, no, I was wrong. Here's where I was wrong. Here's why I was wrong. Here's how I'll probably be wrong again. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. What is important is that you get past being wrong as quickly as you possibly can and get to being right. And you will not get there faster by obfuscating and pretending you were never wrong.
And so that might feel counterintuitive to leaders that in a team of 10, they're probably sitting around the table with all 10 people at once, feeling connected and like even that they're friends with those people. That's probably when it feels like a family.
Yep.
Versus when it's 100 people, they don't necessarily know everybody's name. But in that instance, it's more important to admit that you were wrong. They're probably less inclined to want to do that. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Status is persnickety bastard, to be frank. And it makes your behavior amplified in a way that's really uncomfortable to experience. Like as the leader, that's super uncomfortable. You just feel like you're getting judged for everything you do. And it makes you as a leader start to kind of feel like you shouldn't be able to be questioned. And neither of those things are helpful, but they will kind of happen as a natural feature of you having status. And you cannot wipe your status off.
Yeah, tell us about that, because I know there'd be a lot of people that think, no, I know that people give me status, but I don't. I just am like them and I'm conscious to be down to earth. Tell me about how you can't Can you actually not say?
Yeah, you can't wipe it off, sorry. So a lot of founders they feel like what they want to be able to do is have peer-to-peer relationships with their staff. And a lot of that is actually because they're uncomfortable in that leadership role. They're uncomfortable holding the status that they actually have. And so they keep pretending they don't actually hold it. The reality is that's like walking around with a giant sword on your back and expecting no one to be mindful that you could chop their head off, right? You have the sword. It is there. The way that you help people feel comfortable to operate like a peer with you is actually to accept the fact that you have the status and to hold it gently. So, when someone comes to you and they are, being polite, which they almost always will be, that one of the things you can do is be polite back.
Okay.
And that signals to them that you accept their politeness, you accept the status that you have, and you are giving a whole bunch back to them. So when you have lots of status, you can hand it out really easily to other people. It's a super simple thing to do, and it's the thing that enables other people to rise up to be a peer with you rather than you trying to wipe your status off, which is you dropping down to be a peer with them, which is just uncomfortable, right? Because you pay their paycheck. They need you to have the status that you have.
Yeah.
It's not good for them to have you wipe it off.
Yeah, interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about boards, right? And so particularly in high growth businesses, the boards tend to play quite an important role in the strategic direction of the company, but often tend to stay away from people and culture or HR matters.
Yep.
What do you think about that? Is people and culture the remit of the organisation as an ops practice, or is there some thinking the board should be doing about it?
Well, actually, legally speaking, they can't walk away from it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
They actually have responsibility from a legal perspective for the outcomes of the culture.
Yes.
Most boards are not doing anywhere near enough to actually even know what's happening.
Yeah, right.
And that,
as a key risk.
As a key
risk.
risk.
Governance of directors.
That puts the board, the individuals on the board at risk. But more importantly, the reason that that's the case is because boards are realistically the only plausible check on the power that is held by founders. And in almost all cases, founders are naive leaders. They usually haven't run a business before. And if they have run a business before, it usually wasn't to the level of success of this one. And even in the event that they have run a very successful business prior, they haven't run this business before. So they need someone or some group of people to be able to sense check whether they are doing the right things. And that will primarily play out as culture. So boards need to be paying attention, and I would argue boards need to have some access to the organisation that isn't through the founder.
So that's often a bit of a faux pas.
It is, yeah.
And so if we've got directors listening to this, what would be the advice you say to them? I think often checking in on the culture would be checking, do people love working there? Is that enough, or is that the right starting point? How do they think about what questions they need answered?
So they don't need to check whether people love working there. That's you'll see that in whether or not people leave.
Okay.
So the one thing that boards utterly should have, particularly at larger scale, once things get a bit larger, is if you are getting repeated quarters of high attrition, that is a tragic, tragic sign.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There should be some reporting coming to the board that is quantitative figures that allow the board to see major problems.
But that's clearly a lag indicator.
That's
if people are leaving, that is
indicator.
the last resort for most people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you were coming onto a board early stage in a company, one of the things I would do is sit down with the founding team and talk to them about the fact that their culture will be one of the things that is either a massive accelerant for their business or is a massive drag. And it's very unlikely for it to sit in the middle. And so what we want to do is give them every possible chance of having it be an accelerant. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that we have some checks that it actually is, right? Because the status problem will mean that if just one time the chair of the board pops on down to the office and tries to ask some questions to people that they don't know, it's going to feel like a gotcha question and they're going to say everything's hunky-dory, right? But if instead the founders and the board have created an agreement between them that there is a couple of mechanisms for the board to actually have regular contact with a few key people. So, for example, I would argue the chair of the board should have direct contact with the people and culture lead, whoever that is.
Mm-hmm. What if that's a founder?
It shouldn't be a founder.
Okay.
Yeah. You'd need to be really, really skilled at it for that to be a founder.
Yeah.
So like, for example, if I was a founder of a business, I would not have my own business, have a people and culture lead that was me.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because there needs to be a separate door for people to go in, right?
Yeah,
if people need to complain about leadership, they need to be able to do that to someone who's outside the founding team.
Yeah.
And that person that they get the complaints, the people leader, people and culture person, they need to be able to go to the board if they need to.
Yeah.
And that should actually be in the interests of the founding team. Because ideally, your people and culture leader will also speak to the founders, but the board is essentially the founder's manager. And if the founders are finding it difficult to accept information that's coming up from the ground, then their manager, the board, needs to be able to step in and support them, support the founders to see that information as news that they need to understand rather than a threat to themselves.
So the type of things that tend to get spoken about at startup boards, right, are a series of burning platforms. How much money is in the bank? Do we have product market fit? Are we securing major deals? What are the big risks? Is our tech defensible? Like often super urgent and often unknowable things, like things that a business hasn't tackled before and they're trying to on a new frontier. So it's easy for them to think that the people and culture stuff is known and easy because every business has a people and culture phenomenon. And so let's just make sure people aren't leaving.
Yeah.
If that's the mindset, what would you say to that? It's less important than does our tech work?
I would say that all of those other things are created by people. So if you have great people and culture, you have the right people in the right seats, they know exactly what they're doing and they have the freedom to go do it, then you will be making more progress on every one of those other fronts than if you don't pay any attention, right? If you don't pay any attention, you will get exactly what you described. 5 burning platforms, because the people trying to fix those fires are not able to do that.
And then eventually everyone starts to leave and it's too late.
Yeah. And then you have to go and pretend to the board that everything's still fine when actually you're circling the drain. People are leaving faster than you can replace them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To close out, if we've got leaders listening to this that are thinking, great, I understand that HR is so much more than just 95% more than just the HR that I thought it was. What is the most valuable thing you think they should go away and do in their organizations now? If there was one action for them to take now, what would that be?
Founders need to focus on their own development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you want to be in a fast growth company and you want to be at the top of that fast growth company, you better be learning faster than that company is growing, which is so hard. And most founders leave their own development because they already think they're awesome until it is their Achilles heel and they're dead in the water.
Charlie Simpson from Plucky Frank, thank you for joining our Wade In conversation today.
Thanks for having me.